All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to day two of the Invent Global Esports and Academia Summit. For this panel, we're going to be talking about working for an org versus working for a company, what to expect. I will be your moderator again. Just a brief introduction for people who weren't there at the first panel. I'm currently working in business development at iBuyPower. I've been involved in collegiate esports all 4 years when I was at university. And I have here a great bunch of panelists with me. I'm going to quickly let them introduce themselves as well.
Hey guys, I'm Dom. Nice to meet you. I'm the Chief for Student Program Lead over at NVIDIA. Eric.
Oh, it's me. Sorry. I'm Eric. I work at Facebook Gaming and Strategy, and before that, I was working at PlayStation for standing up their esports program.
Hey guys, nice to meet you all. My name is Sabrina Wong, Culture Program Specialist over at IGEAS. Previous to that, I've been at 100 Thieves and Immortals, as well as a BlizzTurn in 2017. And in my collegiate career, I was able to be president over at UC Riverside for 4 years at Highlander Gaming with Dominic.
Hi everybody, my name is Sandra. I'm an influencer manager at Team Liquid. Previous to Team Liquid, I worked for the Houston Rockets on Clutch Gaming as well as Cloud9, and my collegiate experience was at Carnegie Mellon University, where I ran the program in the club as executive director.
Awesome. Thank you guys for the introductions, and let's get right into it, I guess. So right now, like, all of you guys are currently working for like esports related companies. What would you say is the biggest difference between working for an esports related company and for like an esports team?
I'll start, I guess. I think the biggest thing from my experience when I worked at Gale Force and then Blizzard and now NVIDIA, I think that orgs move way faster. Companies move a bit slower. There's a lot of really dynamic things that happen on a day-to-day basis in an org. And you'll just be assigned stuff, or you'll see like there's a huge fire and you know that there's no one else to solve it. At companies, things move a lot slower. Even if there's a big fire, usually, sometimes there's a team that can help you with it, or it's someone else's job and you can let them know that you noticed this, and you can just, pass the buck, I guess, to say, in some cases. I think that's the biggest difference. I want to let some of my other panelists chime in before I route back. I don't want to take all the points.
Yeah, I'll take it from here. So sorry. So I've worked, on the Blizzard side as well, which is kind of funny. Me and Dominic have very parallel careers. When I was a Blizzard intern, he was working on the Hearthstone esports team actually at that time, and I was an esports intern. So, speaking of those kinds of experiences, as well as some of my opportunities I've done at Riot with data analysis, I can kind of echo Dominic's statement that yes, there is a lot of need for flexibility within the org structure. You're heavily relied on, but at the same time, the pros of that is that you're able to commit a lot of energy and resources and see direct feedback as well as impact, within the organization. You're more of an important player because you are fulfilling the roles, that at a large company might be 5 or 6 people. And that opportunity is, as much as it might be a little bit stressful and daunting to say, it's also really rewarding to like be able to develop projects and be part of things that you get to see the results of, in the next week or so.
Yeah, I would say, so I've never worked on like the non-org side within esports, so I can't do like a direct comparison or anything, but I can speak to a lot of what Sabrina's talking about with the flexibility, and also the need for people to wear a lot of hats at esports orgs. I think some of the really big pros of this are it kind of lends itself to allow you, and this is different from between every esports org, but what I've seen with my work on teams is it kind of lends itself to like allow you to kind of shape your path and your role, like with more flexibility. And so what I found is that when you work at an esports team, you're really passionate about like a certain topic or a certain project or um, and initially you're not hired to necessarily do that, but you have the extra bandwidth to do it. Like they will give you the freedom and the resources to kind of pursue things that you're really excited about. Obviously, as long as you're still doing your normal responsibilities. But I've gotten to work on a lot of projects that initially weren't exactly within the scope of what I was hired for, and they've really allowed me to kind of like run with those. So that's really cool. I think on the flip side, one thing that I feel, and this is improving a lot as esports kind of grows as an industry. But like initially, when I first started working with orgs, I think historically, like esports teams in particular are very like grassroots, full of people who are super passionate about the industry, but also have been, involved in gaming for so long and haven't really had too much opportunity to get professional experience elsewhere. And over the years, this has improved a lot, especially now that bigger stakeholders are getting involved in the industry. People are bringing a lot more experience in. But sometimes on teams, there's still kind of this grassroots like family feel where you don't have as many parties to learn like expertise from, I guess, compared to a company, because companies are big, they're more corporate, they're built out, they have people who have a lot more experience from like all the sorts of different uh, parts of the world,
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I feel like I've only worked in big companies like AT&T, IBM, Facebook, PlayStation, and the thing that I've found to be really helpful, and I'm not sure that I can get in a smaller org, is just like a wide variety of expertise. So you get to learn how like a data scientist is thinking. You get to learn how like a VP of marketing is thinking. You get to think about how operations are thinking about a problem, and it really you get to learn from so many different people, and they have different forms of expertise no matter where you go. And yeah, I get the feeling that when you go to an org, everybody's so busy putting out fires that there's not really time to share anything. So and even if you are, it's more about like, oh, get the biggest fire and crush it. It's not about like how do I optimize the fire closing. So it definitely feels like I've been blessed with learning a lot from different people, but I feel like I'm definitely missing out on the ground floor experience of esports. Like, we don't need to know who won like the last week's game at Facebook. It's like not really important. But for us, we look at like what things are happening on a platform level, maybe like what iOS is doing. We get to look at like what PlayStation, Xbox, et cetera are doing. It's really like we think about such different problems compared to orgs. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and like a lot of you guys are mentioning like being in an org like versus a company, you are expected to do like a lot more tasks than like if you were like actually in like a professional role at a company. And that can be pretty daunting for a lot of people, especially since we do have like a lot of students that are watching right now as well, who may not necessarily be involved with an org yet, and it may seem like a whole scary thing, to just jump right into that. Do you guys have like any advice for people who are looking to take that first step into being part of an esports org?
Do you want to go first, Sam? I think you have the most experience with this.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Okay, so first off, I'm going to start off kind of with what being a culture program specialist at EG is and how this kind of ties into the question. So, as a culture program specialist at Evil Geniuses, I work on a different multitude of projects that we're kind of building out as we innovate and try to find different ways to kind of interact with not only the esports community but gamers at large. And one of the first things that I was able to work on was a collegiate program called the Genius League that not only supports collegiate infrastructure at the chapter level, but more importantly provides career structure at the individual level for outstanding leaders across the nation. So we build a lot of career development there and support for the students. And I think one of the biggest things that we want to support the students with is making sure you understand your goals set and understand your reputation set when you're coming into an esports industry. What do you bring to the table? Assess your skills and make sure that you're understanding of what that need is within the org. Because, I think as Eric mentioned a little bit earlier, the understanding of esports and how it's been for many years is that we have to contribute to fires and we have to solve problems. And that's not sustainable, right? Like esports cannot continue to grow like that. So we need to continue to flood the market with bright new talent that's endemic, that understands the esports scene, so we can move forward from that kind of state of like, oh, we're hiring people, just to fix that problem. And, there's turnover and there's things that need to be moved on. Instead, let's train individuals at the early stages while they're still in that collegiate career with the experience that Sandra mentioned a little bit earlier that we didn't have. People didn't have the experience outside of collegiate to come into the esports pro scene and make it. In reality, a lot of us are very lucky to be able to adapt that fast, but also the reality is a lot of people didn't make it. And how can we help with that? So, we provide these kinds of skills within the Genius League to make sure that, we're flooding this market, not just to benefit EG, obviously, but also to benefit the students and the organizations to make sure that they're getting the best people possible for the job.
I also want to highlight some ways you can get experience with organizations. There's a multitude of different ways to, and there's so many different paths into esports. I'm just going to highlight the ways that we did it. I was extremely lucky to have Sabrina as my president when I was at UC Riverside. And something that I think people really underappreciated at the time was that she and everyone else at the club level had helped build the club. So we grew from a really small organization to eventually leading like 300, 400,000 people events. And the thing that Sad did really well was she reached out to a lot of these organizations and companies. So she's the one who talked to like Riot, Blizzard. We spoke with like Team Liquid, TSM, like all these other orgs. And they wanted to support collegiate and they had no idea how to do it. And by becoming a really strong club, we gave them an opportunity to speak to as many people as we could at the collegiate level. And so it was really cool to, bring like, I think we brought Darshan, we eventually got like Doublelift, we got like all these really cool people to come through. And then because you're the person in charge of the club, you're able to speak to these orgs and have a really cool one-on-one connection. And that was like one of the best ways that you can get involved with an org, especially during the collegiate level, because they want to work with you, you want to work with them, and once you have that one-on-one foot on that door, right, you can talk to these orgs, you can talk to these companies, and now that they know you, it's really easy to pitch like why they should hire you after you graduate from college. So, want to shout out to Sab for all that work so many years ago.
Thanks, Dom. We're a dream team for sure.
Yeah, to kind of speak to that, I think one of the things to take away from this and something that Sabrina's really good at is like, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Like, be confident, be passionate, right? People will see that. I think now, as time goes on, like a lot more people are trying to get into the esports space and it's growing a lot as an industry. And that's a good thing because there's also a lot more opportunity, right? But try, like, don't be afraid to stand out. Like, orgs and companies, they're going to be looking for people who go above and beyond, who are really passionate. And don't be afraid to, reach out to people like Sabrina did, even blindly, right? You don't necessarily have to know them beforehand. People will notice that.
Yeah, something to add to what everyone's saying, which is what you guys were basically saying over and over again. It's basically a lot of networking and a lot of skills, and making sure you can think about how the gaming space works in a business sense. So there are a lot of avenues for networking. Obviously, this panel or even just watching these talks is a good way to start networking. From the skill side, I've never actually worked when I went to college. There wasn't esports clubs in school, so that wasn't really an opportunity for me. I didn't even live in California, so it was just like really brutal to get there. But companies started valuing my skills a lot over the years, and I got lucky to to get into esports. So I would say that's a really key aspect. A way you can sort of think about some of these problems at home, I think about is like from a sponsorship and partnership perspective. I think about it this way, right? Like you see Coca-Cola on like the Overwatch League and you think, oh, cool, like a company is joining. That's awesome. But like I think like a next level thought is like, I wonder what other partners would be a good fit for gaming. And then the next one would be like, all right, now that I think about that, how would we actually get through? Like, who would the contacts be? How would we actually make that happen? And like the next level after that is how much are they actually worth? Like, what kind of deals would I actually make if I were doing this? And when you start realizing the kinds of questions you can't answer, those are the kind of skills that some people might want, especially for the types of jobs that you're looking for. And I'm just using like sponsorships as an example. Obviously, we can go into like event coordination. You can go into like management and like just think about how it would actually be to perform the job that you want to have. And then when you think about that, sort of like aim for that skill set in your real work. And it doesn't always have to be gaming to start. It's possible to pivot. So yeah, that's my advice.
I kind of want to add one more like last note because I think everyone said such amazing information that, something sparked in my brain. But, this is kind of like a really short personal story, but when we look back into our esports careers, I'm sure every other panelist can kind of think of this. It wasn't like one giant no just was the reason why we got a job. Like we talked to one person, we got a job. No, there was a lot of building that foundation over time. Talking to people who can support you. Like, I've known Sandra and Dom for a very long time. Being able to kind of support each other through the experience, being able to network with people. It's not all about like talking to the boss per se, but it's a lot about creating and cultivating a community that is all level set and has the same sort of expectations and goals that you have to really make sure you try to make it. So
yeah, I think similar to what she's saying, when we talk about networking, it's not just plain like knowing people, right? I think the real value of networking comes from learning from the people within your network and really developing that understanding of the industry and how other people see the industry and the different roles that are available and how different like we're talking about now, how different types of companies operate and what their needs are.
Small story on networking for me. So in business school for me, we were basically told to like reach out to as many people as possible, and like your success rate is going to be super bad. So I think I reached out to like hundreds of MBAs in gaming, and then about like a third of them responded. And then out of a third that responded, like 10% became real connections. Like basically, if I reached out to 150 people, 50 people would respond, and then out of that, I think I had 5 like really good friends come out of it. And it's just you just got to grind and do it. It just really helps. I mean, you could look at that as a like 97% failure rate, but to me, it's like made 5 really good friends out of that. So they all end up helping either just like through advice or actual like job referrals or anything like that. It really does add up.
Yeah, it definitely just takes one success in order to be successful. I also want to highlight something for those of you who aren't reading the live discussion. Nick also mentioned like you should just start doing things that you feel really passionate about in order to try to make it. That reminds me of a story where I think we met again someone at UC Riverside, Matt, who used to work for CLG, and I think the way that he got his job was he realized that like for esports players back in the day, that like they weren't playing ergonomically, and that was something that he was really passionate about and something that he had a lot of knowledge in. And so he literally like walked up to CLG and said like, hey, like, did you realize that your players are like performing like underperforming because they're like not like sitting up straight, they're not like they don't have any ergonomic desks, all these things. Like I can help with that, and like I can help like stretch out your players, I can help do all these things. And then CLG basically said like, oh, that would be a really good thing to have, and then they hired him. So if you can find a problem that people haven't solved yet that you realize that like you can help solve, it's really easy to pitch yourself that way.
Yeah, you guys have shared a lot about how to really like get yourself into that professional esports scene, and thank you for all the advice you've given. I know there are a lot of people watching right now that are currently involved with like their collegiate org or something similar to that. What would you say would help them transition from working in a less professional org like that into working for a company? Like we mentioned earlier, a lot of people in esports orgs, they kind of like wear a lot of hats, they do a lot of different things. It's flexible, but obviously companies have like policies, they have guidelines. How do you make that transition?
Um, I would say a lot of the experience I gained doing collegiate actually was very applicable to working for an esports team, and was a large part of why Cloud9 initially hired me when I applied. Funny story is like I spent a lot of time in collegiate and in my esports career networking, and I did find it to be super valuable. But when I got hired for my first esports job, it wasn't through like any networking. I had done any connections. Like I didn't know anybody at the company. I just literally applied on LinkedIn, and then they reached out for an interview. Um, and when I asked my hiring manager later on, he said that a large part of what intrigued them about my experience was what I did in collegiate, and sort of being able to outline like all of the different skills that I had learned in collegiate that I was able to apply to working on an esports team. And when I did collegiate, because I was running all of CMU esports, I was able to like Will said, like wear a lot of hats, and kind of touch on every aspects of like working at an esports team, right? Because that's kind of what collegiate is. It's like a more grassroots version of a team if your collegiate program is involved in competitive, and then with like the added like events side, because collegiate is also very events heavy. I know Serena has a lot of events experience, and that is also really good, and she's able to apply that to what she does as well. um, I think that in my collegiate experience, I majority focused on the competitive side because it was what interested me the most. So even though I had opportunities to work on like every single aspect of like the quote unquote business, I really got my hands dirty with working like directly with players and with the team. So I kind of managed and did some like career coaching with our League of Legends team, which for for a non like athletics program, we actually did really well. We went to the collegiate finals in LA, and that actually taught me a lot of lessons about working with players, even though it was like a very unstructured kind of setting, right? And a lot of those lessons I was able to kind of draw from and apply to everything that I do today. So
Yeah, I kind of want to add to that as well. I think that, there's a lot of positives that Sandra mentioned that you get to learn in the collegiate space. You learn how to work as a processes, you work as a team, you kind of understand these kinds of tasks that are really important to be successful in esports and support the esports organization or company that you're going to be working for. However, I think that there's a lot of things that you also need to learn outside of that. Collegiate does teach a lot of bad habits, in my opinion. When you're working as a solo person, like Sandra said, or even as a team, there is a little bit of a sense because you're not on payroll. You're not getting paid for those times. You're volunteering all your hours and you're working really hard. That burnout is a real thing in the collegiate esports space. And that's something you really need to start honing in and learning before you get into that professional environment. Because if you have those kinds of instances, who's going to back you up there? Like it's not like there's a lot at stake when it comes to working in a professional org or company. You can't afford yourself to work very, very hard at a short stint of time and then rely on a long period of time of that burnout. Another thing is like, coming into from the collegiate to the pro environment, is that you need to understand that when you are providing yourself to a team, it's not a bunch of college students. It's people from a variety of environments and backgrounds, whether it's corporate, non-endemic, endemic, gamer, not gamer, different ages, ethnicities, backgrounds. And those things are much more important to support and cultivate in a culture of an esports organization. If you're kind of being sassy or like a little weird or have like, are just not meshing with the team. I know we can all think of this. I see everyone smiling. I know we've all experienced this. It's just hard. It's harder to work, and you need to be understanding and be able to be flexible with how you're communicating with your team versus in a collegiate space where you're really just trying to do the most with the least you have, right? Now you have the resources, do the most with that. And I think my final point is that it's really important when you're in that collegiate space to get the opportunity to be in an internship. Blizz turns, Riot interns, those are all available right now, even though we're in a coronavirus time. Make sure to apply for those. Being able to get internships at other places that aren't even gaming or esports related will give you that corporate experience that will push your resume to the top. And when you get that job, you'll know exactly how to handle all of the politics, all of the lifestyles, etc., that it takes to succeed in a more professional environment.
Real quick, I also want to say, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll be really quick. I think that since a lot of you are, college students or involved in collegiate, your collegiate experience is what you make of it, especially since, like Sabrina said, like you're not on payroll, right? It's all volunteer work. You get out of it what you put into it, and you decide where you go with it and what you learn from it, right? So you want to really kind of like hone in on what your goals are and what kind of skill set you want to develop when you're looking at how you want to approach collegiate. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you. So I want to share a story, especially around like PlayStation. So there is basically the esports team was just getting started up, and I got a chance to look at some of the resumes that were coming in, and I got to talk to my VP and my director, who were basically looking at a lot of resumes, and I was really, I think, lucky to get in. And I asked them, like, what made you pick me over all of these like big name people in esports? Like there was a president of an esports org applying for my role, and like I got it over him, and I was really confused. I was like, this guy obviously knows what he's talking about. And I asked them, why did you like what's your thought process around picking people? I got a chance to see these resumes as well, so for other roles, and I just asked them straight up, like, what really separates like a good candidate from a better candidate? And it's they basically said, a lot of the gaming industry people are pretty jaded, and so it's hard for you to get a fresh perspective. But B, there's people who just like show up with work. So like I didn't think this was like a big deal, but I guess it was. I went into the interview with like a PowerPoint deck, like nothing huge, like a 5-pager, and I was like, hey, this is what I would do if I were working on this plan. And they were like, you're the only one who came in with a plan. I was like, that's great. That's cool. I didn't think that was a big deal. But the second thing I want you to take away from is like, I had zero esports experience. And like the fact that I was able to beat somebody who was a president, like, feels really rewarding for me. I mean, like, maybe that's a little selfish, but like it just meant that you can overcome things just by like looking at it from as many angles as possible and like showing value over like title. So I just want you to know that even if it feels like it's impossible, because esports is really grindy, there's so many applicants, it's a small industry. I mean, there's so many things working against you that like it's possible,
Yeah, I want to echo a lot of what everyone else is saying. One, when you're in collegiate or when you're even in a smaller org, try to learn as much as you can by branching out and doing a lot of different things. At a company level, you don't necessarily always get that opportunity. Two, I actually had a very similar experience to Eric, where when I was applying to NVIDIA, I wrote a kick-ass resume, kick-ass cover letter, and then I wrote an 18-page document on like what I would do if I were hired, and I think that was what really put me over the top. Um, and I feel really bad for a lot of these college students because back in the day, cover letters weren't necessary, and now they're like completely like you should definitely do them. And now I think you have to bring something maybe a little extra to the table in order to be noticed. Something that I want to highlight that I don't think anyone's touched on yet is how much. Well, you guys touched on that a little bit. How much of your experience at the collegiate level and at the org level actually transfers over, and sometimes even succeeds expectations at the company level. Um, at the company level, there's often times where people are not really necessarily bought into esports yet. They love gaming and they know what esports is, but they haven't necessarily like gone to the point where they're like, yes, we should invest a ton of money into this. And what comes along with that is like a lot of the things that you guys are naturally doing at the collegiate and the org level. I think a couple months or maybe half a year ago now, I actually had to call a meeting at NVIDIA where they said like, oh, we have a bunch of these marketing dollars. Where do we spend it? And then I said, have you guys heard of this app called TikTok? Because it's like blowing up right now, and I really feel like we should be investing some money into TikTok. And they're like, what's TikTok? I'm like, oh, all the kids are using it these days. Like, if you're trying to reach like these people, like TikTok is where it's at. And they had no idea. Like, I literally had to like bring up TikTok and show them like this is how it works, and like this is how awesome it is, and all that kind of stuff. And like, I keep saying back in the day, but like back in the day, right? That would have been like Instagram because they didn't know what that was, and then it was Twitter. Now it's TikTok. Like a lot of the apps and things that you're naturally using because you're part of that generation comes really naturally to you. But at the company level, it's not necessarily there because a lot of us at the company level are kind of set in our ways. Like I still use Facebook, and I'm sure like the next generation is not going to use Facebook anymore, and they'll use something else entirely. And then I'll have to be educated. So don't forget that like all these things that you're naturally doing, like there is a ton of value in there. And I think that a lot of college students and a lot of people don't recognize that value because it comes so naturally to you. And it's just not something that companies necessarily have in their repertoire yet.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And unfortunately, we are already out of time. I think that was the quickest half hour of my life. But again, thank you guys for sharing your experience, your stories with everyone watching. There might have been some questions or topics we may not have covered, but for those of you watching, like, feel free to network with any of us on the Invent site. Like, I'm sure a lot of these guys are willing to have more discussions or answer more of your questions on their own time. But again, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for the panelists for taking the time to be here. And I believe we will be going to another break before the next panel.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having us, guys.
Thank you.